Hi everyone, welcome to ELI, the place where you get your daily dose of inspiration for entrepreneurship. And today we have with us Mr. Vishnu Ramesh, who is coming to ELI for the second time. He's the co-founder of Subtl.ai. Vishnu, of course, is a graduate of BITS Pilani, and he has already come to ELI to share his journey. So, in this particular episode, we will just revisit what has happened since we last spoke and what all changes that has happened to his company and to the industry. If you have not seen the earlier episode, go visit episode number 84. So, hi Vishnu, welcome to ELI.
Hi Priya, thanks for having me. Nice to see you again.
I would request you again to introduce yourself to our audience.
Absolutely. So, hi guys. Again, my name is Vishnu. I'm the CEO at Subtl.ai. And Subtl.ai basically creates custom search experiences out of text sources like documents. So, if you're an enterprise and you have, let's say, 2,000, 3,000 documents that have to be looked at very regularly, which is something we find in industries. Like if you look at the banking industry, for example, then there's a very regular need to go through regulations that come up from authorities like Reserve Bank of India. So in these cases, there's usually a lot of information overheads that happen because in most cases you can either run like these control F searches on top of documents after opening them one at a time from a very large repository, right? So that itself is very time consuming. The other option is usually reaching out for an expert's time, but then there's the overhead of actually waiting for them to get on a call with you so that you can kind of bring up all your information requirements. So our solution can basically take in natural language questions. So the way you would ask an expert, you can actually type it out in a search bar. And right, that's fundamentally what we do. We're able to map in these incoming queries to information that's most relevant to them from these large volumes of documents.
So basically, if I have a question around a document and I'll just type it, it will go like a Google search and it will find the particular segment where the answer to that question is there.
Right. So we let our users upload documents and then we let them ask questions. And then through the product, you can also give ratings. So that's actually one of our features that's in the pipelines right now. There's a way to improve the accuracy directly from ratings without any kind of human intervention. So there are some hurdles with respect to setting that up, but yeah, there are things like that we kind of have on our roadmap.
Okay. So now we'd like to know a little bit about the technology that works in the hindsight to perform that task.
So the underlying technology itself has, I think, three key parts, right? The first part is actually being able to cleanly extract data from documents. Because if you look at PDFs today, they would have like titles, they would have paragraphs and, maybe images, tables in a very haphazard manner. So it's actually very difficult to go through that and come up with clean extracts of data that can be fed into the engine. So that was one challenge. So that effectively became, one pillar of our technology. The second one was actually being able to understand the intent of the user based on what they say. So the current version that we have right now has zero dependence on keywords, which means the keyword you use in the question you ask does not matter because this pillar of the tech can basically understand the intent of the user based on what they're asking. And then I'll just also quickly mention that there are ways to make domain-focused versions of this also from the documents. So that's also one of the pipelines. So it's like you start with an open domain and then you can kind of go towards, domain-focused solutions. Right. The third part is mapping the intent to the answer itself. So this is where breaking down the whole document helps because now it's all broken down into chunks. And then the final part of the tech is basically figuring out which extract is most relevant to the query that was asked.
Okay.
There are some situations where the answer might not be in the documents itself. So that's why we also set up a relevance score against every answer that comes, which we don't show a number. It's basically like color codes. So if the relevance is red, you can basically say, okay, the model is not very confident. It's suspicious of the answer that came. If it's green, then it's like the model also has high confidence. It's a good answer. So it helps the user also kind of filter out these answers.
Okay. So, in other words, I can say it's a search engine for your private documents or your private cloud.
Yes, it's a managed search service built on top of documents
Gotcha.
with a domain focused angle, essentially.
Gotcha. Now tell us what has happened since we last spoke. Earlier we spoke, you were just pitching the clients and product was just ready to launch in the market. What has happened so far?
Yeah, things have been good, Priya, since then. So we have got initial traction in the form of two defense PSUs. So they are manufacturing use cases, and then we were also able to close a contract with the bank, which I think details of the bank we would disclose once we go live for them. Uh, but right, so that has been good. And I think the second thing that we actually had to work on from between that point and now was what the focus would be for the product. We had to figure out where we wanted to start which markets we wanted to start tapping into. And so as per our traction, what we decided to do was get into the BFSI sector, just taking our initial traction at the bank, because we also realized that there are a lot of information related problems that we can solve in the banking sector. And we also realized that there are two ways to solve it. So one of them would be directly selling our product as a search service to these banks, where they can keep it in their on-premise environments, where it's still their servers, so their private data is secure. Uh, the other option is actually through existing platforms itself in the form of API partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the product that we built, but then we also have REST APIs that can be used by existing platforms.
Okay.
So, for example, if there are a lot of anti-money laundering platforms out there
Mm-hmm.
that essentially help look for suspicious transactions or any kind of fraudulent activity. So a platform like this can essentially leverage our APIs to do things like RBI search. So like there are a lot of RBI circulars that come up, and they would have their own set of RBI circulars that they would also find relevant, either for them or their client.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so in that case, it's possible for them to actually set up a search feature within their platform itself, where anyone logging in can like quickly search from RBI documents, get relevant answers. And that's something that can directly be powered from our APIs, either on cloud or on-premise. So if they're doing an on-premise offering, we're also willing to, help them out with the on-premise deployment. But right, so there are these two key strategies that we're looking at initially in the BFSI sector.
Okay. So,
And then, yes.
one key observation I have been making of all product companies after the product is ready, when they look for growth, they integrate with a lot of partners through API. So when we do the integration, there are multiple type of platforms that you can integrate with. How do you shortlist, or how do you select the platforms to integrate with when you start doing the APIs and all?
So as far as SaaS platforms go, some of them can benefit from a document focused search feature. But it again depends on the kind of offering that they have. So if another example that we're actually looking at very seriously right now is CRM platforms. So we realized that CRM solutions from their sales support angle, there'd usually be a lot of documentation that they have to be on top of, whether it's, I think, product documentation or even like support manuals. And then one more thing we realized is there are also a lot of tickets that have to be looked at very regularly. And the relevance of the ticket comes because there's usually a solution also tagged to it, because someone has taken that ticket in the past and then solved it. So in cases like this, our solution can kind of help, because we do it on top of documents anyway. And then it's also possible to feed in ticket information into the same search service. So it's like one aggregated search service where you can initially build it out of documents, but then you can also add custom text sources as per the requirement. And that's something that we support. So we call it the custom driver concept, where you can feed in customized sources of information as per how the enterprise is set up.
Okay. And speaking of the other business vertical where you find clients by yourself, can you tell us a little bit on how do you search for the prospective clients and how do you approach them?
Uh, I think I'll just quickly set the context saying there has to be a product market fit. So for us, since we were able to close one bank, we knew that there was a product market fit.
Mm.
The second thing is, I think every industry has its own nuances. I can speak for the BFSI sector. What we have learned from our outreach activity in this sector is you have to have a clear proof of ROI, where
Mm.
like so because, and that's something that we had a challenge with initially, because we had to prove that the search can actually help, which is something that we were able to do now with a track record. In some cases, in some, I think in manufacturing use cases, we have a peak accuracy of 85%,
Mm.
and in the banking sector it's about 93% right now, just based on internal tests that we keep doing, trying to track it. But right, so in the BFSI sector, track record matters a lot. That they need to be 100% sure that it would solve the problem, because even right now there's still a little bit of I would say hesitation when it comes to AIML products,
Mhm.
but thankfully it's definitely becoming much better.
Okay.
Just you can see the differences even year on year.
Mm.
So yeah, that's reassuring. But I hope that was informative. If you have any
Speak,
doubts on that, I think.
Speaking of product market fit, can you help us understand how did you achieve that? Any tweaks in the product or any tweaks in the messaging did you do to achieve your product market fit?
So So the product itself, we had, I think when we initially started off, it was just a prototype that could run searches from PDF data. So we
Mm-hmm.
kind of had to build from that to, get a more specific definition of that. Because we can't say we help like enterprises search from PDFs. It has to be something like we help banks search from regulations. So banks do search from regulations. That was a fact. So it's always best to kind of start with a premise and then work up from there.
Mm.
And through our clients, and then from whatever interactions we were able to have with the BFSI sector, we had realized that there is a regular need to go through this high volumes of regulations, and then it's also a growing problem, which means like they have to be on top of all the regulations up till now, or like possibly from like 2012 until now. And then even from now, week in, week out, there are new regulations that come in. So it's a big set to look from, and it's also a growing set. And right. So in scenarios like that, so and then of course the question, we also have to get more specific from that, right? We need to understand where they need it. So if you look at like a banking structure, they may have like 10 to 14 different essentially lines of business.
Mm-hmm.
So we realized that our technology can kind of help benefit different lines of business in different ways. For example, if you look at training and onboarding, when a new employee joins a banking enterprise, they definitely have to get a lot more aware of the regulations that have come out from RBI in the past and present. So to help with more information onboarding, that's something that our tech will be a very powerful product for, because it saves a lot of time. So of course they would have their existing infrastructure, right? They would have like SMEs that are probably doing like training sessions for new joinees and such. But our product will be able to kind of really speed up the process,
Mm.
just by allowing employees to ask their questions based on where they have doubts, and then they work up from there. And then of course, if they want to read through a document, we obviously help them find the relevant document also, because they ask a question, they get an answer, and then from each answer you can either download the full document, or we actually show the answer highlighted in a sub PDF that will open in a new tab. So you can kind of see your answers in the documents also. Um, right.
Understood.
I'm sorry, you can let me know if that cleared it or.
Absolutely. Uh, Now tell us any changes that has been done on the finance part. How are you funding your operation? Did you raise investments, or how is it?
So we did raise a small friend and family round from a relative.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so that is a very small one, just to kind of help us in between paychecks. But then at this stage, we are at the early revenue period, where we have gotten initial revenue from our client contracts, and then we're also, as we complete our contracts with our existing clients, which we expect to do possibly over the next 1 month. But as we complete the contracts, there'd be effectively, summer burn that comes. At present, we are, of course, focusing on scaling market presence in India. But then we are also exploring raising a 300K uh, angel round at this point. We might do it from a VC, or we might also do it from angels. So that's something that we're still exploring. But yeah, we would, as per our timeline, we basically want to do it after we scale up a little bit more. We want to, I think, get a little bit more traction, build on top of our existing customers, and we think that's when the time would be right.
Gotcha. Any pivots did you do to your business model so far?
Oh, we've had to. So when we started, we were actually focusing on the legal sector in India.
Mm,
We did realize, so that was a very natural thing to go to, and I think that's something that we still get a lot. Every time we bring the product up, the first thing they say is, "Hey, what did you look at the legal sector? Is there anything you tried to do there?" Uh, so yes, so there were about 2 or 3 pivots. So initially, we did look at the legal sector, but then we realized that it's still not viable enough, at least in India.
mm,
And there's also a tech compatibility in some sectors. So at the stage that we were at, we did not know how to make these domain focused versions of the models,
mm,
which is something that we can do now. But at that point, so there were a couple of hurdles that we didn't see through. Uh, I think around that time was when we had got, the contract with the bank, which was like our initial traction. And that's when we started considering it. But since, as per the contract, we were building the MVP over maybe an 8-9 month period, we started trying to play out all our options, just do a lot of market sector analysis and understand what our competitors are doing, so that we can get a clear idea of what makes most sense. And right, so there was some exploration in the pharma sector also, which we still believe there are problems in that sector also that we can solve. But we, over time, one mistake we made was we tried to be too distributed in terms of the domains,
mm,
which is something that we have fixed now. So right now we have essentially razor sharp focus in the BFSI sector. We're going to try selling this to banks, and then we're going to try selling this to platforms that also sell to banks, who may want to set up a document search feature that would essentially complement the offering that they already have. So it can kind of come up as a value-added service.
What is the
Uh,
North Star metric that you follow at your company?
so there are a couple, but then I think one I would say is definitely hitting 250,000 users. So that's something that we want to, that's kind of the North Star that we're running towards. Like that's a target that we want to hit, which with our existing client base, that's something that is possible over the next month. So that's something that we're very excited about. But that's the North Star that we're targeting right now. Just kind of trying to scale to 250,000 users.
Gotcha. Any growth hacks that you are doing right now to scale up your user base or anything?
I would say get involved with a lot of the communities in focus. Like, for example, just as an example, if you're creating a competitor for Uber, there'd be a lot of community forums that are kind of, one, talking about these apps, but then two, also talking about like different issues around like carpooling. And you kind of, if you're able to tap into a community problem that's kind of being broadcasted to such an extent,
Mm,
uh, it's the best thing to do to kind of build your solutions to work up from there, to say like, okay, so what do they need to fix this? And then, because doing things like that, there would also probably be minimum pivots once you have information like that.
mm,
So it takes some time, kind of going through Quora feeds and like Reddit and like kind of, or like different platforms itself that have like focused user bases and like, but it helps a lot. It's you should kind of picture the startup as like a ship going over the ocean, and then
mm.
like being able to look at different sectors is kind of like seeing, okay, the path ahead, like what is the best thing to do. And right, so
What
I feel
are,
like,
yeah, go on.
no, I was just saying, I feel like organic growth comes when there's that perfect line between the problem and the solution. Usually hurdles to scale come when there's like some sort of drift between what the users want and what is being offered, which is, I think, something that naturally a lot of startups face. We have also faced. So you kind of identify what the drift is and then you work towards it, just to keep the fit as perfect as possible.
What are
Yeah.
the challenges that you have faced so far while growing up the venture? Of course, while building, you had some challenges and that you had explained during the last interview. Now, tell us what has been the challenge in last 1 year.
Uh, I think one challenge was trying to keep our unique selling point, very different from what's being offered in the market. So that was something that we had to be very careful about, because we realized that there are a lot of solutions coming up in the market. There are big players like Amazon also that have Amazon Kendra, but then there are also players that are creating very focused solutions. So there's a company called ThoughtTrace that does this on top of legal contracts specifically.
Mhm.
Uh, so we realized that we had to have clear focus of who we're going to solve the problem for, and then we also had to have clear focus of what our unique selling point is. So just being able to deploy on premise and cloud, just to have those two options, we're kind of able to filter out some of the big players. uh, Coming to other players, yes, it is. So information access is a huge market that's kind of broken down into these domains, and there's also a need to create these domain focused solutions. So I think that's where, so a company like ThoughtTrace is, they would, from what we have understood, they are looking at exploring other markets also outside legal, but it all seems to be oriented around contracts. So if they're dealing with legal contract, these could be like, manufacturing contracts if they try to get into the manufacturing sector. I might be wrong, but that's what it appears to be. Uh, Right. So, and creating these domain focused solutions is an issue. And as far as our competitive advantage goes, I think one thing I would say is it's one of our advantages is in how we develop the models. So it's not just a one-time build model and then that's deployed for you. It's more like we provide the open domain model, and then the client checks out the accuracy for that. If they like it, that's great. If they don't like it, we can create domain focused models out of the documents directly, and then that usually does the job. Because what happens with creating this domain focused models is, at a high level, the model is able to understand the ontology of the domain, because like each domain has its own like linguistics, right? They have their own terminology.
Mm.
So that's something that gets essentially learned at a high level with these domain focused models. What also happens then is, like, beyond that, there would be the ratings improvement, like I mentioned,
Mm.
that, so like they can keep giving like 0 to 5 star ratings to each answer. And over time, we can kind of aggregate all the ratings, and then the model can make improvements based on that. So that's how they can actually see the product improve over time,
Okay.
consistent basis, until at some point it will get saturated, where they have all their information requirements taken care of.
So, from a product standpoint, what is the vision forward? What is the long-term goal?
Sorry, did you see from a product standpoint?
Yep.
So in terms of product, yeah, there I think we have decided to keep focus on improving the core technology APIs itself. So some of those improvements would be like being able to improve the range of data that we ingest. So right now, the data can take in documents, it can take in like custom text sources, which means, like, if enterprises have like pieces of information that they want all their employees to find, if they have to find it, they can kind of feed in data like that also into the search. So it's truly a customized. Uh, so we would kind of build on that to feed in more source of data. There is some exploration that's happening with databases. So databases is, of course, a structured format of data, and then it's essentially like trying to access information from a table, which
Mm.
is like it would have its own nuances compared to a text-based search. But that's something that we're exploring, and then based on the validation that we see for these prospective opportunities, we would essentially scale up the data, the types of data that we can handle.
Okay. So, as an entrepreneur, you are not only handling the technology side of it, you are also handling the business side of it. And uh, uh, at times, when you do both the things together, it may become little restless, tired, or stressful for you. How do you manage to be consistent throughout your journey of entrepreneurship?
It's, I think the first thing you understand is you cannot do everything on your own. If you truly want to build something, like you kind of have to, rally the guys who are with you, and then you have to delegate.
Right.
So as far as my relationship with Subtl.ai goes, I basically started off as one person in the tech team that built the initial prototype,
Mm,
which it was more of a proof of concept then. So it was like a summer internship in 2018, and then so I had started from there with a tech background, but then over time I had to transition to a more executive role, and then as I transitioned, I also had to get people in who could take in responsibility for different elements of the technology.
mm,
So I'm still very involved with the tech team, and then I still contribute as per required. But then now we have successfully built a tech team that we can fully trust, a product and tech team, because my co-founder actually handles a lot of the product initiatives.
mm,
So the way we run the startup is like I oversee outreach operations, and then I'm also involved with the tech team, mostly drawing room discussions. So there's a lot of planning and strategizing in terms of the tech also that happens.
mm,
Of course, fully guided by Prof. Manish Srivastava. So I would also mention Professor Manish is the chief scientist of the startup,
mm.
and all of our initial prototyping and from prototyping till this MVP stage, he was involved through the process. Constantly helping us out with the research experience that he has amassed over the last 15 years.
Absolutely. Uh, Now, I think we are almost out of time. Just have one question, one final question for you. Tell us what have you learned in last 1 year, so that we can learn from your learnings, and we don't have to go through the same learning process again that you went through.
So what I realized was with every startup, there's a window of opportunity that comes up. Now, there's also a condition for it, which means you have to kind of write out the process of building it and finding customers and kind of going through it, and then you would deal with rejection along the way. We have definitely had our share of rejection, where I think at some point someone had said, "I think you have found a good problem, but I don't think you can solve it." So we had things like that was coming in, and like you have to you have to write it out. You have to be okay with not doing a great job at it first, and I think that humility and that openness to kind of grow from there is more important than where you actually are. And I believe as long as you keep doing that, there would be a window of opportunity that comes up, and then once the window of opportunity opens up, you'll know how much time you have, and then it's usually a very critical period, and the window of opportunity, and it's like over that point is like essentially where you're almost at the peak, and then you kind of cross it. That I think it's that initial point of like achieving revenue from the product market fit. So that's something that you have to be very aware of, that there's going to be a window of opportunity, and then when it has to come, we have to be ready to,
Mm,
come to it. It's kind of like amassing everything that you've done until that point, and then at some point it looks like it. So that's how overnight successes also happen. It's called an overnight success because one night something crazy happens, and then once that crazy thing happens, they start looking at all the things that he did over the last, like he or she did over the last like 5 to 10 years.
mm,
And like that, because that's how artists also become famous, right? So let's say they keep putting up songs on YouTube, and then suddenly you find like one song and it's like, oh, this is a very nice song, and then you look at all the songs, and then that's it, they're famous overnight.
so true.
So that it's a very consistent process, and yeah, it does involve a lot of work, and it does get difficult. Like there's definitely a lot of I would say mental wrestling that happens with the team also internally, and I think that's important. You have to challenge each other, as you have respect for each other, and take it professionally, but you have to be able to mentally wrestle to kind of challenge each other to do more, which my colleagues definitely challenge me, and I also try to challenge them. So it's kind of a bi-directional relationship.
Awesome. Well, I must say it was a great pleasure to have you again in ELI, and thanks for your time. And I would say my best wishes for Subtl.ai. I'll like to see it growing.
Thanks, Priya. Thank you so much.